How do you do research to verify your content ideas so that you don't end up spending 25 hours a day to get 25 views in a week? The first is to gauge your audience interest and see whether they're actively searching for that specific question or that specific content. This can go anywhere from like searching on the groups or forums like Quora or Reddit like I mentioned before, all the way to checking yours and other people's comment sections, and even your DM or this question box. Now, this is usually just good for the initial part of the research process. It doesn't mean that this will get as much views usually just because it's something yes, it is interested and people are actually looking for it, but the volume and the search may not be proven yet. However, this is definitely a good way to create content, and you definitely should do this, especially if you know someone asks, simply because this is actually something that is demanded by your audience, and you can make sure that when you create this content, not only you directly answer their questions, but you also build a relationship with your audience, because now they know that you are actually someone who care about them by answering their questions. The second is to do keyword research to find its competition and search volume. You can do this from many different softwares and applications like Ubersuggest or vidIQ, TubeBuddy. There's quite a lot of plugins for this too. Ideally, you would want to find a keyword that has high search volume but a relatively low competition. But of course, that is pretty rare, so usually anything in between, like a quite high search volume with like a middle competition kind of thing, that should do the trick. Also, just like I mentioned in the previous video too, I think if I'm not mistaken, make sure that you add additional value in the content that you are creating and personalize it to you, as this will introduce specificity to your video, to your content, to your Instagram page, whatever, the content that you are creating. And people tend to gravitate towards this more than the general subjects. The example that I used last time is that instead of only how can I make my credit score better or how can I improve my credit score, you can say something like how I improve my credit score to about 800 by age of 21. So that's not only introduce specificity, it's also some relevancy, and it's something that you actually done already. The third is to monitor trends. This is especially useful when you are creating something that you know will have a sudden spike in search. Something like, let's say, the new iPhone, the new camera. An example from a few weeks ago is the SVB bank collapsing. So I remember that's quite viral. So like Dave Ramsey covered it, a lot of like financial people, Graham Stephan, all of these people cover it. So it is definitely like a huge spike in search volume. So that's an example of trend and how you could take advantage of that. Some trends definitely require you to have access first before the public do, like the new iPhone or maybe like Sony or whatever. Usually like tech type of thing, some people who has influence, they'll be able to see the product before anyone else, which will of course give them additional advantage. But some just require you to keep an eye out to see what is going on in your industry or other industry that may affect yours and capitalize that early on. Again, just like the bank example, most people probably don't know that that's coming, and if you're not someone who keep an eye out in the industry, you probably would not know until a few days later. I gotta say though that this is definitely the type of content that is so hard to pre-plan just because a lot of them are current events. Maybe like product updates, it's pretty easy to pre-plan, but current event stuff is definitely hard to pre-plan because it's current. So it's definitely smart to leave an empty slot, maybe a couple hours or an hour, just to sift through this kind of thing in your calendar, and maybe some slot that's available in your content calendar too. And a quick tip, it is okay if you cannot be the first for whatever reasons, like you don't have the access like we mentioned before, if you physically cannot get a product on the D-Day. What I found and what from a lot of people try, including myself on the experiment that I did on my and my clients' content, is that if you could post like maybe the next day or two, even the week after, it probably could still be good, just depending on the type of relevancy of the content. So you definitely have to pay attention to that. But again, the rule of thumb is make sure that you do cover the things well, so you don't just ramble something just to get something out. And you also try to post it as soon as possible.